At JFK Airport, amidst the evening hustle and the golden hues of sunset, Michael Carter, famous black businessman in his 40s, made his way through the busy terminal. A sharp dresser and a known figure in the corporate world, Michael had built his reputation on strategic brilliance and an unwavering work ethic. Having just finalized an intense week of negotiations for a groundbreaking aviation merger, he was physically drained but quietly triumphant. His destination was London, where he was scheduled to meet his new executive team and solidify plans for the future. Clutching his leather carry-on, Michael glanced at his boarding pass seat 2A in business class and felt a brief sense of relief. This flight was his chance to unwind before diving into the next chapter of his career. Michael Carter approached the boarding gate, his tailored suit and confident demeanor reflecting his hard-earned success. The gate agent greeted him with a professional smile, scanning his boarding pass quickly. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Carter," she said, handing it back to him. Michael nodded politely and stepped onto the jet bridge, feeling a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. This flight wasn't just another business trip. It marked the first time he would fly with the airline he had recently acquired. As he entered the aircraft, Michael was greeted by a flight attendant whose practiced smile faltered ever so slightly when her eyes met his. She quickly recovered, maintaining her professional tone. "Good evening, sir. Your seat is just down the aisle to the left," she said, gesturing toward the business class cabin. Michael thanked her and walked towards seat 2A, a spacious leather chair complete with a plush blanket and a glass of champagne waiting on the armrest. He placed his sleek carry-on in the overhead bin and sank into the seat, exhaling deeply. The cabin's atmosphere was calm and inviting, a sharp contrast to the frenetic pace of the last week. Michael took a sip of the champagne, savoring its crisp taste as he powered on his tablet to review emails. The soft hum of the plane's engines was already lulling him into a state of much-needed relaxation. Around him, a few other passengers were still finding their seats, while some exchanged quiet pleasantries with the attentive flight attendants. For Michael, this moment of tranquility was rare and well-deserved. He leaned back in his seat, allowing the stresses of his recent negotiations to melt away. The deal had been monumental, one that would reshape the aviation industry, and this flight felt like a small reward for his tireless efforts. He closed his eyes briefly, soaking in the comfort of his surroundings and looking forward to the quiet journey ahead. Unbeknownst to him, the peace he had just begun to enjoy was about to be disrupted, testing his composure and resolve in ways he hadn't anticipated. As Michael settled into his seat, savoring the rare moment of calm, a shadow fell over him. Looking up, he saw the same flight attendant who had initially greeted him, her expression now uncertain. "Excuse me, sir," she began hesitantly. "Could I see your boarding pass again, please?" Confused but cooperative, Michael handed over his pass, noting that none of the other passengers seemed to be receiving similar treatment. The flight attendant studied the pass, her eyes darting between it and the seat number. After a moment, she spoke, her tone cautious. "It seems there's been a system error. Unfortunately, this seat wasn't actually available and we'll need to move you to economy class." Michael's brows furrowed. "Economy?" he repeated, incredulous. He had paid for his seat in business class and couldn't understand why he was being asked to move. The situation left him unsettled and deeply perplexed. Michael looked at the flight attendant, his initial confusion giving way to a quiet but firm resolve. "I don't understand," he said, his voice steady but tinged with disbelief. "My boarding pass clearly states this seat, and I pay for it. Why am I being asked to move?" The flight attendant's smile tightened, turning slightly condescending. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but due to a system error, this seat was double booked. We need your cooperation to resolve the situation and ask that you move to economy class." Michael's expression hardened. "With all due respect, I don't see how this is my problem. My boarding pass confirms I belong in this seat, and I intend to remain here. If there's been a mistake, it's on your end, not mine." The firmness in his tone caught the attention of nearby passengers. A few glanced over, curious about the brewing tension, while others pretended not to notice. The flight attendant, clearly flustered, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir," she pressed, her tone more insistent now, "we're trying to resolve this as smoothly as possible. Moving you to economy is the quickest solution." Michael's calm exterior began to crack slightly as he leaned forward. "Smoothly for whom?" he asked pointedly. "I purchased this seat, just like anyone else in this cabin. If there's an issue, I suggest you find another solution that doesn't involve penalizing me for your system error." The flight attendant's face flushed, and her tone grew sharper. "We don't want to escalate this further, sir. Please understand that this is an unusual situation and we're trying to do what's best." Michael remained unmoved, his gaze unwavering. "And what's best is for me to stay in the seat I paid for," he replied. "I'm not moving to economy, and I suggest you take this up with the gate agent or your supervisor." The conversation, though controlled, was growing increasingly tense. Michael's refusal to back down highlighted the injustice of the situation, and the nearby passengers began to murmur among themselves. The flight attendant, clearly out of options, stood stiffly. "I'll have to bring the cabin manager," she said curtly, before turning and walking briskly toward the front of the plane. As she left, Michael leaned back in his seat, a storm of emotions churning inside him. He had dealt with moments like this before, where people assumed he didn't belong in certain spaces, but this felt particularly blatant. His calm but firm stance wasn't just about the seat, it was about standing up for the respect he had earned. Around him, the air seemed heavier as the other passengers waited to see how the conflict would unfold. Moments later, the cabin manager arrived, his dark uniform and measured demeanor exuding authority. He approached Michael with a practiced professionalism, though his expression betrayed a hint of discomfort. "Good evening, sir," he began, his tone neutral. "I've been informed about the situation. Unfortunately, there's been a technical issue with the seating arrangements. This seat was mistakenly double-booked, and we need to ask for your cooperation in resolving the matter." Michael regarded him coolly, sensing where this was headed. "I see," he said evenly. "But my boarding pass clearly shows that this is my seat, and I paid for it. I'm not moving to economy class because of a mistake I didn't make." The cabin manager pressed on, his tone growing more persuasive. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Carter, and we sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. As a gesture of goodwill, we'd like to offer you a travel voucher for the trouble." Michael's jaw tightened, his patience wearing thin. "A voucher doesn't change the fact that you're asking me to give up a seat I rightfully purchased. If there's an issue, I suggest you find another solution. I'm not moving." The manager hesitated for a moment, his eyes flicking around the cabin. Michael could feel the weight of the unspoken implication hanging in the air, one that was all too familiar. "Sir," the manager continued carefully, "we're simply trying to resolve this smoothly for everyone involved." Michael leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but firm. "And the smoothest resolution is for me to stay in the seat I paid for. I'm not moving, and I'd like this matter resolved without further escalation." The tension in the cabin was palpable as passengers watched the standoff unfold. As the tension in the cabin reached its peak, a younger flight attendant approached, her demeanor calm but concerned. She glanced at the cabin manager, who was visibly uneasy, and then turned her attention to Michael. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her voice even and professional. The cabin manager quickly responded, his tone clipped. "We're addressing a seating issue. This seat appears to have been double-booked." The younger attendant frowned slightly, clearly skeptical. Without another word, she pulled out her tablet and began scrolling through the passenger list. A few moments later, her expression shifted, first to surprise, then to quiet certainty. She looked up at the cabin manager, her tone firm but polite. "Actually, there's no error. Mr. Carter is in the correct seat. There's no record of the seat being double-booked." The cabin manager blinked, caught off guard. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice faltering. The younger attendant handed him the tablet, pointing to the relevant information. "Positive. Everything checks out. Mr. Carter is exactly where he's supposed to be." For a moment, silence filled the cabin as the weight of her word settled in. The cabin manager's face flushed red with embarrassment. He glanced at Michael, his professionalism crumbling under the weight of his mistake, or worse, his implicit bias. "My apologies, Mr. Carter," he muttered stiffly, before turning and walking away, his pride clearly wounded. The younger attendant turned back to Michael, her tone warm and apologetic. "I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding, Mr. Carter. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable." Michael nodded, his face calm but his frustration still simmering. "Thank you," he said curtly, settling back into his seat. As Michael settled back into his seat, vindicated but visibly tense, the frustration lingered. He had stood his ground and was proven right, but the experience left a bitter taste. Moments like these were all too familiar, a reminder of the unspoken challenges he faced as a black man navigating spaces where his presence was often questioned. Despite his success and accomplishments, there were still those who doubted his place, treating him as if he didn't belong. He glanced around the cabin, catching glimpses of passengers who had witnessed the confrontation. Some looked away quickly, avoiding his gaze, while others offered small, awkward smiles of support. Yet, the weight of the moment wasn't something he could easily brush aside. It wasn't just about a seat, it was about respect, fairness, and the constant fight to assert his rightful place in a world that didn't always welcome him. As the plane began its ascent and the city lights disappeared beneath the clouds, Michael allowed himself to relax. This incident was just another hurdle, one of many he had faced and overcome. But soon, things would be different. In just a few days, the airline would officially be his, and he would ensure that fairness and respect became a cornerstone of its operations. The next time he boarded one of these planes, there would be no question of where he belonged. He would make sure of it. This story highlights the importance of addressing discrimination and fostering meaningful reflection on issues of bias and inequality. It serves as a reminder that everyone deserves respect and fair treatment, regardless of their background or appearance. Through this narrative, the aim is to encourage dialogue about the subtle and overt ways prejudice can manifest, and to inspire change toward a more inclusive and equitable society. The channel stands firmly against any form of discrimination, racism, or prejudice. All stories shared are crafted with respect for diversity and human dignity, intending to promote awareness and understanding. This channel does not support or tolerate violations of human rights and remains committed to creating content that encourages empathy and respect for all individuals. By sharing such stories, we hope to inspire conversations that lead to greater awareness and positive action in the fight against injustice.